What does it truly mean to discover who you really are in the Spirit? It means awakening to a reality that is greater than your physical limitations, your past failures, and the opinions of people around you. Many people live their entire lives only aware of their physical body and their emotions. They measure themselves by what they see in the mirror, by the money in their bank account, or by the words spoken over them in childhood. But the truth is, you are more than flesh and blood. There is a spirit within you that carries divine potential, authority, and power. To discover who you are in the Spirit is to realize that your identity does not begin with your circumstances, it begins with God. Before anyone labeled you weak, average, or incapable, heaven already declared purpose over your life. When you understand this, your mindset begins to shift. You stop speaking like a victim and start speaking like someone who carries divine strength. The spirit within you was not created to be crushed by fear. It was created to overcome. Many people struggle because they identify more with their problems than with their spiritual position. They say, I am poor, I am sick, I am broken, or I am unlucky. But discovering who you are in the Spirit means separating your condition from your identity. Your condition may change, but your spiritual identity remains powerful. When you understand this, hope begins to rise. Faith begins to grow. You no longer pray from desperation alone, you pray from authority. Inside your spirit is the ability to believe beyond logic. The human mind looks at facts, but the Spirit sees possibilities. The mind counts resources, but the Spirit trusts provision. When you discover who you are spiritually, fear loses its grip. Doubt may knock at your door, but it cannot control your decisions. You begin to see challenges as opportunities for God's power to be revealed. This discovery does not happen automatically. It grows through prayer, meditation, and speaking words of faith. As you spend time in God's presence, your spiritual senses become stronger. You start to recognize that you are not alone in your battles. There is divine help working with you. Your spirit becomes sensitive to guidance, conviction, and encouragement. What once intimidated you now strengthens you. When you truly know who you are in the Spirit, your posture changes. You walk differently. You speak differently. Even in hardship, there is a quiet confidence within you. You understand that setbacks are temporary. You understand that storms do not define your destiny. The Spirit within you carries resurrection power, the ability to rise again and again. Discovering who you are in the Spirit also means understanding that you were designed for impact. Your life is not random. Your voice matters. Your prayers matter. Your faith influences your family, your community, and even future generations. When you pray, something shifts. When you believe, something moves. When you stand firm, darkness trembles. You may feel weak in your body at times. You may feel overwhelmed emotionally. But your spirit can remain strong. And when your spirit is strong, it lifts your mind and body with it. This is why nurturing your spiritual life is essential. The stronger your spirit becomes, the more resilient you are in every area of life. To discover who you truly are in the Spirit is to step into freedom. It is to reject the small version of yourself that fear created and embrace the powerful identity God designed. You are not just surviving. You are called to overcome. You are not just existing. You are destined to influence. When this revelation becomes real to you, nothing will look impossible anymore. Why do many believers live far below the power God has already placed inside them? The answer is not because the power is absent. It is because the awareness is absent. Many people have received spiritual promises, but they have never fully understood how to walk in them. It is like having a great treasure buried beneath your house, but continuing to live in poverty, because you never discovered what was already yours. One of the greatest reasons believers live below their spiritual potential is fear. Fear limits vision. Fear whispers that you are not ready, not qualified, not strong enough. It magnifies problems and minimizes God's promises. When fear controls the mind, faith becomes silent. Even though power is present in the spirit, it remains inactive because doubt blocks its expression. The battle is often not about whether God has given power. It is about whether we believe it. Another reason is spiritual ignorance. Many believers do not truly understand their authority. They pray, but they pray as beggars rather than as sons and daughters. They ask timidly instead of standing confidently. When you do not know your position, you accept defeat too easily. You tolerate what you were meant to overcome. You accept bondage where you were meant to declare freedom. Knowledge changes posture. When you understand who you are spiritually, your prayers shift from desperation to declaration. Comfort is another silent enemy. Some believers settle for survival instead of pursuing victory. They are saved, but they are not growing. They attend services, but they do not develop spiritual discipline. Power grows through relationship and consistency. If prayer becomes occasional and the word becomes optional, spiritual strength weakens. Just as muscles shrink without exercise, spiritual authority weakens without practice. The power may still exist within, but it becomes dormant. Negative words also play a major role. What you repeatedly speak over your life shapes your reality. If you constantly declare weakness, failure, and limitation, your mind begins to believe it. Words are seeds. When planted consistently, they produce fruit. Many believers unknowingly sabotage their own faith by speaking defeat over themselves. They confess their problems more than they confess God's promises. Over time, their confidence shrinks. Past failures can also hold believers back. When someone experiences disappointment, unanswered prayers, or mistakes, they may begin to question their spiritual strength. Shame convinces them they are unworthy of power. But spiritual authority is not based on perfection. It is based on grace. When believers remain trapped in guilt, they distance themselves from the very source of their strength. Instead of rising after failure, they retreat. Distractions of the world also dilute spiritual focus. Busyness can replace devotion. Worry can replace worship. The noise of daily life can drown out the quiet voice that strengthens the spirit. When attention is divided constantly, spiritual sensitivity decreases. Power flows where focus goes. If focus remains on problems, power feels distant. If focus returns to God, strength is renewed. Comparison is another trap. When believers compare their journey with others, they may feel inadequate. They may assume that spiritual power belongs only to leaders, preachers, or special individuals. But power is not reserved for a select few. It is available to every believer who chooses to walk in faith. Comparison shrinks confidence, while personal conviction strengthens it. Ultimately, many live below their spiritual power because they have not made a decision to fully trust and step forward. Power requires action. Faith requires movement. When you choose to believe despite fear, to speak despite doubt, and to stand despite opposition, the power already inside you begins to manifest. The truth is not that you lack power. The truth is that you must awaken it through faith, discipline, and boldness. How can faith transform impossible situations into testimonies of victory? Faith begins where human strength ends. When circumstances appear closed, when doors seem locked, and when logic declares that there is no way forward, faith introduces a higher reality. It does not deny the existence of problems, but it refuses to accept them as final. Faith sees beyond what is visible and speaks to what is invisible. Every impossible situation carries two voices. One voice says, "It cannot be done." The other whispers, "With God, all things are possible." The voice you choose to believe determines the outcome you will experience. Faith is not blind optimism. It is a confident trust that God is greater than the challenge standing before you. When faith rises, fear loses its authority. Impossible situations often feel heavy because they expose human weakness. A financial crisis reveals limited resources. A medical diagnosis reveals physical fragility. A broken relationship reveals emotional vulnerability. In these moments, the mind searches for solutions and finds none. But faith does not rely on what the mind can calculate. It rests on what God can create. Faith shifts your focus from your limitation to His unlimited power. When a person chooses faith, something changes internally first. Before the external miracle appears, an inner transformation begins. Anxiety begins to lose control. Peace replaces panic. Confidence begins to grow quietly within the heart. This inner shift is the first sign that victory is approaching. Faith creates stability in the storm. Even while winds blow, there is a calm center within the believer. Faith also changes the way you speak. Instead of constantly repeating the problem, you begin to declare God's promise. Words carry power. When spoken with belief, they shape your mindset and strengthen your spirit. Speaking faith does not mean ignoring reality. It means declaring a greater reality. Over time, your words align your heart with hope instead of despair. Another way faith transforms the impossible is by activating perseverance. Many breakthroughs happen after seasons of endurance. When a person believes deeply, they refuse to quit. They continue praying when answers delay. They continue trusting when results are not immediate. Faith fuels endurance, and endurance often positions you for miracles. What looks impossible today may simply require persistent trust. Faith also opens doors of creativity and wisdom. When you trust God, your mind becomes open to solutions you never considered. Ideas begin to flow. Opportunities appear unexpectedly. People come into your life at the right time. Faith aligns you with divine guidance. What seemed blocked begins to shift because you are no longer paralyzed by fear. Importantly, faith transforms the purpose of the trial itself. Instead of seeing the situation as punishment, you begin to see it as preparation. Instead of viewing the obstacle as destruction, you see it as development. Impossible situations refine character, deepen trust, and strengthen spiritual maturity. When victory finally comes, the testimony carries weight because it was forged in struggle. A testimony is powerful because it proves that God moved where human effort failed. It becomes a story that inspires others. Your breakthrough encourages someone else who is still waiting. Your victory becomes evidence that faith works. This is how impossible situations turn into testimonies, not by chance, but by unwavering trust. Faith does not always change circumstances instantly, but it always changes the person who believes. And when the person changes, the situation often follows. What once looked like the end becomes the beginning of something greater. When faith stands firm, impossibility loses its definition. Victory becomes not just a hope, but a living reality. What role does prayer play in activating spiritual authority in daily life? Prayer is not merely a religious routine or a quiet moment of reflection. It is the channel through which spiritual power flows into everyday reality. Many people see prayer as something passive, something gentle and private, but in truth, prayer is one of the most powerful actions a believer can take. It is where weakness connects with divine strength and where limitation encounters unlimited power. Spiritual authority does not operate automatically. It is activated through relationship, and prayer is the language of that relationship. When you pray, you are not simply speaking into the air, you are aligning your heart with God's will. Alignment produces authority. When your thoughts, desires, and words begin to reflect His promises, confidence grows inside you. You no longer face life as someone alone. You stand as someone backed by heaven. Daily life presents constant challenges. Decisions must be made, temptations arise, conflicts appear, unexpected problems surface. Without prayer, it is easy to react emotionally or impulsively. But prayer creates spiritual awareness. It sharpens discernment. You begin to sense what is right and what is wrong more clearly. Instead of being driven by fear or anger, you are guided by peace and wisdom. This guidance is a form of authority, the ability to choose correctly even under pressure. Prayer also strengthens inner stability. Authority is not loudness or aggression, it is calm confidence. When you consistently pray, your spirit becomes anchored. Circumstances may shift around you, but your center remains steady. People may panic, but you remain composed. This quiet strength influences environments. Others begin to feel peace around you. Your presence carries weight because it is rooted in prayer. Another important role of prayer is that it shapes your words. Authority is often expressed through speech. What you declare over your family, your work, and your future matters. Prayer trains your tongue to speak life instead of negativity. When you regularly communicate with God, your vocabulary changes. Complaints decrease, gratitude increases. Fearful predictions are replaced with hopeful declarations. Over time, your spoken words begin to carry conviction and power. Prayer also builds endurance. Many daily battles are not dramatic, they are subtle and repetitive. Discouragement can creep in slowly. Fatigue can weaken determination. Through prayer, strength is renewed. Even a short but sincere moment of connection can restore courage. Authority grows when you refuse to quit. Prayer fuels that persistence. It reminds you that your efforts are not in vain and that unseen help is working on your behalf. Furthermore, prayer activates spiritual sensitivity. You become more aware of opportunities to encourage someone, to act with kindness, or to stand firm in truth. Authority is not only about overcoming obstacles, it is also about influencing others positively. Through prayer, compassion deepens, boldness increases. You learn when to speak and when to remain silent. This balance reflects mature authority. Prayer transforms ordinary moments into sacred encounters. A workplace conversation, a family decision, or a personal struggle can become an opportunity for divine intervention when covered in prayer. Instead of separating spiritual life from daily responsibilities, prayer weaves them together. You begin to see that every area of life can be touched by God's presence. Ultimately, prayer keeps the connection alive. Just as a device loses power when disconnected from its source, spiritual authority weakens without consistent communion. But when prayer becomes a lifestyle rather than an emergency option, authority flows naturally. You walk through each day aware that you are supported, guided, and empowered. That awareness changes how you respond, how you speak, and how you stand. And in that steady connection, spiritual authority becomes a daily reality rather than a distant concept. How can vision and positive confession change your future? Vision is the ability to see beyond your present reality and imagine the life God desires for you. Positive confession is the act of speaking that vision into existence with faith and conviction. Together, they form a powerful spiritual principle. What you consistently see in your heart and declare with your mouth begins to shape the direction of your life. Every person is moving toward a picture they hold inside. If that inner picture is filled with fear, failure, and limitation, their actions will slowly align with that negative expectation. But if the picture is filled with hope, growth, and victory, their decisions begin to reflect confidence. Vision becomes the blueprint of your future. Without vision, life feels random and reactive. With vision, life becomes intentional and focused. Vision starts in the heart before it appears in reality. It is not denial of present challenges. It is the courage to imagine something greater despite them. When you hold a clear vision of healing, restoration, or success, your mindset shifts. You begin to prepare for what you believe is coming. Your habits change. Your priorities adjust. Your discipline increases. Vision quietly influences behavior. Positive confession strengthens that vision. Words are not empty sounds, they carry creative power. When you repeatedly declare words of faith, your subconscious mind absorbs them. Your emotions respond to them. Your spirit aligns with them. Speaking hope consistently weakens doubt. Declaring possibility reduces fear. Over time, what once felt unrealistic begins to feel attainable. Many people unknowingly confess negativity over their own lives. They say, "Nothing ever works for me," or "I will never succeed," or "This situation will never change." These statements create internal resistance. The mind begins to believe them, and actions follow that belief. But when you choose to speak differently, even before circumstances change, you create space for transformation. Positive confession challenges limiting beliefs and replaces them with expectation. Vision and confession also influence perseverance. When obstacles arise, a person without vision easily quits. But someone who sees a greater future presses forward. They are motivated by what they believe is ahead. Their confession reminds them of their purpose. Even when results are delayed, their words reinforce patience. They continue declaring what they believe rather than surrendering to temporary setbacks. Another important effect is emotional stability. Vision gives direction. Confession gives courage. Together, they reduce anxiety about the unknown. When you consistently speak faith over your life, your emotional responses begin to align with trust rather than fear. Peace grows. Confidence develops. You stop reacting impulsively and start responding intentionally. Vision also sharpens focus. Instead of being distracted by every problem, you concentrate on progress. You evaluate decisions based on whether they move you closer to your vision. Positive confession reinforces that focus daily. It becomes a reminder of where you are headed. This alignment between thought, speech, and action builds momentum. Over time, small changes accumulate. Your mindset influences your behavior. Your behavior influences your habits. Your habits influence your outcomes. What began as a picture in your heart and words on your lips becomes visible reality. Opportunities appear because you are prepared for them. Relationships improve because your attitude changes. Growth becomes natural because expectation replaced doubt. The future is not shaped by circumstances alone. It is shaped by belief and declaration. When you hold a clear vision and consistently confess it with faith, you are not pretending. You are participating in the process of transformation. Slowly but surely, the future you once imagined begins to take form, and what started in the unseen becomes visible in your life. What is stopping you from stepping into the bold, fearless life God has prepared for you? Often, the greatest barriers are not external circumstances, but internal limitations. The door to a greater life may already be open, yet hesitation, doubt, and insecurity keep you standing still. The life prepared for you requires courage, and courage begins with a decision to move forward despite uncertainty. One of the strongest obstacles is fear of failure. Many people would rather remain in a familiar struggle than risk stepping into something new. Failure feels threatening because it challenges pride and comfort. But failure is not final, it is formative. Every bold step carries the possibility of mistakes, yet mistakes are often the pathway to growth. When fear of failure dominates, potential remains locked. When faith becomes stronger than fear, movement begins. Another barrier is the weight of past experiences. Disappointments, betrayals, and setbacks can create invisible chains. You may unconsciously expect future attempts to end the same way previous ones did. This expectation limits initiative. It whispers, "Why try again?" But the bold life requires release. You cannot carry yesterday's pain into tomorrow's promise. Healing becomes essential. When you allow restoration to take place in your heart, courage is renewed. Comfort zones also hold many people back. Comfort feels safe because it is predictable. Even if the situation is not ideal, it is familiar. Bold living demands stepping beyond familiarity. It asks you to trust beyond what you can control. Growth rarely happens in comfort. It happens when you stretch beyond routine and dare to believe for more. The fearless life is not reckless, it is obedient to a higher calling that refuses to settle. Negative self-perception is another hidden barrier. If you constantly see yourself as inadequate, unqualified, or weak, you will hesitate to take bold steps. Identity shapes action. When you underestimate yourself, you shrink from opportunities. But when you begin to see yourself as capable and empowered, confidence rises. The shift starts internally. As your self-image aligns with God's promise rather than your insecurity, boldness becomes natural. Comparison can also rob courage. Looking at others and measuring your progress against theirs creates discouragement. You may feel behind or less gifted, but comparison distracts from purpose. Your path is unique. The fearless life prepared for you is not identical to someone else's journey. When you focus on your own calling instead of competing with others, clarity returns. You begin to pursue what truly belongs to you. Another obstacle is waiting for perfect conditions. Many people postpone action, thinking they need more resources, more certainty, or more approval. But boldness rarely waits for perfection. It moves with what is available. It trusts that provision will follow obedience. If you wait until you feel completely ready, you may never begin. Courage grows through action, not before it. Ultimately, what stops you is often a choice, the choice to remain small or to step into possibility. The fearless life requires daily decisions. It requires speaking faith when doubt arises. It requires moving forward even when outcomes are unclear. Boldness is built moment by moment. You may not control every circumstance, but you control your response. When you choose trust over hesitation, vision over fear, and obedience over comfort, barriers begin to crumble. The life prepared for you is not distant. It is waiting for your agreement. When you decide that fear will no longer dictate your steps, you begin to walk differently. And with each step of faith, the bold, fearless life becomes not just a promise, but your reality.